Hi everyone, sorry about that. So, welcome to our usual live session. Today is a very special day. Today is World Mental Health Day. So, for those who didn't know, every year World Mental Health Day happens on the 10th of October, and every year there is a different theme. So, last year would have been mental health in the workplace, and this year it is young people and mental health in a changing world. So, what does that mean? Young people and mental health in a changing world. So I think every year the theme um, usually is made from what we're understanding about mental health every year with new research, new data, and of course just how we'd like to approach the theme of mental health in a different direction every year. So this year we're looking at young people. Last year we would have looked at the workplace. For those who don't know, I would have spoken at the Rotarac in Barbados pertaining to mental health in the workplace. So this year we are looking at young people and mental health. Now, why is it important for us to talk about young people and mental health? Because most of those cases of mental health that we see are with young people. It's not to say that older persons or older adults or the elderly don't happen to experience mental health. But oftentimes, mental health does pop up around the ages of 14 and 16 and 18. Usually, for those who don't know, we have three growth spurts that we go through. One when we're a baby, and then again in our teens, and then again at the kind of end of our teens. And these mental growth spurts also help with brain development, change in behaviors, change in biology. And because with the change in biology in the brain, we then tend to see mental health disorders popping up. So, and every person will have their own different reasons for having an onset of a mental health disorder. So depending on the disorder, depending on the person's coping mechanisms, how people, what people have experienced in their life. Two people may have been brought up in the same exact home, but someone biologically might be predisposed to a condition that the other person didn't. And this is why this argument of nurture versus nature has happened for 100 years, because you can have you and a step sibling live in the same home but two different parents, and you still end up with a mental health condition. And then there are other cases where you don't. You both may have it, or one may have it, the other one may not. And it always comes down to nature versus nurture. So again, why young people? A lot of young people are susceptible to a lot of things that tend to create mental health. So what they say typical teen angst. So a lot of things like peer pressure, drug use, family-related issues, school-related issues. I think people underestimate how much things like family, school, society can have an impact on your mental health. And so the next part of the theme is in a changing world. So what is the World Mental Health Federation saying when, the Federation of Mental Health saying when they say in a changing world? To me, that sounds like we're really trying to get the acceleration on how the world sees mental health. It's not just in an old world. It wasn't said in a world, in this world, on earth. It was said in a changing world. And that would suggest that we are moving from a place of discrimination and stigma and more towards knowledge and education, awareness and advocacy. And so with that, we tend to be able to start to see things a little bit more differently. So before, a lot of our energies used to go into just advocacy and awareness. But once we start seeing the agenda changing and we're able to see that people can look at mental health as just regular health and something that should be looked at just as anything. One had a broken hand or a broken toe, or they're sick like me, that's the same thing that we should be looking at mental health as. So we are changing how the world sees it. And the less time we have to put energy into just advocating for the rights of people with mental health disorders, the more time and energy and money and research we can put into actually having more programs geared towards mental health. So the less time we have to spend showing people why it's so important, the more likely we are to have the time to do more programs, help to fund more young psychologists to become practitioners, more research for places like the Caribbean and Guyana, and less time spending just showing people or giving them pamphlets. And for those who know, I am all about the ground ground level, grassroots type of intervention. I'm not about putting a piece of paper in your hand and being like, mental health matters, you know. And so you have to be able to kind of meet people where they're at. And hopefully, with this changing world, we're able to get more persons on board with understanding what mental health is, how it can be affected, and how do you actually recuperate when you have mental health conditions. So um, one of my talks that I'm having, for those who don't know, I am the interim SWAG coordinator for SASOD. So SWAG stands for SASOD Women's Arm Guyana. And so on Friday at the SASOD office, we will be having a discussion on women's mental health. Now, there were some comments as to, Riza, do they not care about men? What about the men's mental health? Now, absolutely, everyone's mental health matters. And I get the concern. And I have asked around after that question, what does the Men's Bureau do? Are there any men's group doing anything? And it seems that men seem to have a harder time getting out participants, and that's unfortunate. But we do encourage persons who are men, who might be gay or bisexual or transgender, to come out and come to our events, because they may still be not necessarily men's issues. They may be men's issues, but they just happen to also be attached to a community that have been discriminated against and have had human rights violations against them. So we try as much as possible to do things for the empowerment of all people. So as much as I understand that men groups should exist and men should be definitely as equally targeted for mental health awareness, we definitely need to understand that places like SWAG, places like SASOD, and empowerment groups like SWAG are geared towards women empowerment. So why women's mental health? So when we were going through the topics, I realized that, hey, this SWAG event is right near our mental health day. So I said, you know what, I think we should take it. I was going to kind of do like coping mechanisms and self-care, which for those who know me, I love to talk about self-care and coping mechanisms because I feel like people should be learning tools and not just learning what their disorder is. So I realized that this had already kind of been done. And what people didn't know is the fact that disorders have their different symptoms and their different signs. So if you are someone who thinks or is not sure, or you're seeing someone around you who's having like bizarre mentation or ideation, or is having mania, or is having some signs of depression, so withdrawal, lack of interest, no interest in hobbies, not speaking, and so on, or there might be an abusive situation. These all have to do with women's mental health. So there are some conditions that women tend to be more affected by, and there are scenarios in society such as sexual assault and domestic violence that do create other disorders such as PTSD. And so what we're going to do on Friday is go through those disorders and some of the signs, because I think that people need to understand that this is not just strange behavior, but it's actually the onset of a mental health condition. And I think that that's what we often let slip through the cracks. Sometimes, a lot of times, persons have no clue that their friend, their girlfriend, their neighbor is having an onset of a mental health condition, because they just don't know what the condition looks like. They don't know that, that you shouldn't be having like auditory hallucinations. Some people ask me all the time, like, Riza, if I talk to myself, is that weird? I said, no, people talk to themselves all the time. I said, but are you answering back? Like, are you hearing another voice answering back? And people don't know. Trauma has some very strange ways of getting affecting your mental health. And from what I've seen, a lot of persons, again, I said this 3 to 5 years ago, that most of the people I know, or not I know, but I know that there are persons who are affected with PTSD in this country because we have so much trauma in Guyana and we don't have enough practitioners to see everybody. So there's multiple people, thousands of people walking around with something as simple as PTSD just because they couldn't get justice, just because they couldn't get closure after an assault, just because they didn't get to report the umpteenth time that their partner hit them. And so these kinds of social injustices can have long-lasting mental health repercussions. So what we'll be doing on Friday is talking about the disorders. And so I want you all to understand that mental health is everywhere. It can affect anyone at any time. It has affected even I, and I'm a practitioner. And so you have to be understanding that young people, old people, doesn't matter who, LGBTQ or not, mental health is so intense and complex and complicated. Sometimes I talk to a client and I have an idea of exactly kind of what has happened and have an idea of how I'm going to approach this and so on. And then there are cases that I have to go home and research. And I would be a bad practitioner if I didn't come home and do my research, or I didn't ask questions from people who might know the answer. Because I work with LGBTQ persons, they are sometimes what we call a queer question. I am like, I have a queer question, because I have not been in this community long enough to understand certain things. And so I have been really blessed to work with people who are part of the community, who do understand certain things, who do understand how a situation might affect someone more if they were gay versus whether they're straight. And so all these little things matter. And when you're dealing with a population who has been violated, and a population that has been discriminated, and a population who's had a difficult time in terms of like human rights and policy and government and police protection and justice, you have to be able to be sensitive. You have to be able to be open to the fact that these cases are going to be challenging, and that you have to be open to knowing that everything is not going to come to you right away. And as a beginner's therapist, you have to understand that as well. So even I, as a practitioner, still have a lot to understand and a lot to learn. And so I just want everyone to kind of understand what Mental Health Day means for many people living with mental health. And I also want persons to get what it is for even practitioners. Why is this such an important day? For us practitioners, it's the one day of the year that we get to be all, this is why it's important, this is why you need to listen to me. But for me and most of you who know, Mental Health Day is every day for me. Suicide Prevention Day is every day for me. So I just encourage persons to go out there, continue to ask the right questions, continue to be curious and sensitive, and know that there are people who are going to have mental health, and you'll never know. There'll be people who will be on prescription medication, and you'll never know. And that's okay, because everybody has their own journey when dealing with mental health. And everybody has to be able to work with the changing world that is happening. People are becoming more diverse, people are becoming more aware, people are understanding things like mental health and social injustices and trauma better. I'd like to believe so. I have hope that in the long run, the people that we're producing are better people than we were in our generations before. And the more that we can do in terms of research and understanding, and even government policies for people who are from a vulnerable population, whether it be mental health, LGBTQ, victims of DV, victims of rape, we are doing ourselves a greater justice for our future in this changing world. Yes, I am plugging the theme of this year. So for those who tuned in, thank you. I know I was having some issues with my camera this evening, but I thank you all for tuning in. And please, 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 you can replay this. You can come and check it back and tell me how it went. Tell me what you think. What is your opinion of mental health? And how do we know what mental health looks like? Comment and give comments and let me know if you had any cases that you were like, is this mental health? What was this, Riza? So let me know in the comments and give me a thumbs up if you liked that I try to keep it short this time. And have a great night. And yes, we can say happy World Mental Health Day because I only have happy thoughts for the future of mental health. Good night, everybody.